out. In my mind, feminism needs to be it needs to be eradicated, lock, stock, and barrel. There's no way out of this. And I'll tell you what, it's a very serious problem that we're having. And we're just at the tip of it exposing itself, right? And seeing the ramifications long-term of it more so. And I'll tell you what, this is the downfall of America. Never mind the West, just in the US. This is our kryptonite. This is the elephant in the room. This is that annoying hyena that can't seem to shut up, that thinks everything they say is funny. That sort of microcosm is endemic, right? It is and it permeates every part of the culture, every institution. And look, I hate to call out a subhuman species of this, but the liberal white woman is really at the forefront of this movement, and they've sort of spearheaded it, and then every woman has essentially adopted it. But the liberal white woman essentially has sort of allowed itself to get pillaged, right? Because they are the ones that say more immigration, more refugees, more taxation, bigger government, more organization, sort of that whole thing, right? More taxes, no police, right? This sort of compassion economy, if you will. And downstream from that is every other ism. And look, like I said, I think it's permeated every aspect of daily life. I think culturally, men are cucked to the gills because it's really hard to call out something when it's everywhere, right? When it's in every single thing. It's how we slowly went from Merry Christmas to Happy Holidays. And I'm just like, this happened in one swoop and nobody even noticed. And it comes with that whole concept, right, of tone policing and making sure that everybody, no one feels uncomfortable, everyone is welcome. The healing, sort of the trauma circles, the sort of, regenerative, if you will, justice model, right? This sort of utopic landscape that they think in their mind they're sort of pretending to put up. And so, like I said, it's in every institution. It's in the language. It's in dating. It's in all kinds of public spaces. There really is no space where a guy could be a guy and say off the cuff things without there being some consequences. And it's funny because it's not just girls that are sort of like keeping this thing afloat. It's a lot of guys too that, you know, wax poetics about egalitarianism and equality and everything related to that, about women can do the same things as men. And this whole corny nonsense, right? And it's just a power play. They're just trying to get pussy, and it's part of the game, and they don't see it as any other way. But it's like they're feeble, they're nimble, they're decrepit, they're soft, and they don't realize that that's the reason why they can't get any play. And it's also, I think, if you think about it, it's also a symptom of a bigger problem, which is why test levels are so low, because it's like, well, if you look at the culture, nothing about the culture tells you you need to be maximizing your masculinity as much as possible. If anything, you need to limit it. You need to tone it down so that you don't offend the crowd. And so if you're being told that constantly and you're being barraged with this message indefinitely, you start to believe it, and you start to, you know, adopt a lot of those modalities without even realizing it. And so that's the first case, is to kind of catch it, see it for what it is, and then decide to discard it, do away with it, and go back to nature. And this is why I think feminism has reared its ugly head, is because we don't wander with the seasons. We don't go outside. We don't have to live off the land. There isn't that demand to respect, never mind tame nature, right? But there is no respect when it comes to nature. And so what ends up happening is that we have built this semblance of comfort, however illusory it is. And it's allowed us to think, well, because of this, we're on the same basis, right? The sexes are the same. When the reality is, if I had to survive for a day or two or more or a week out in nature, clawing, clamoring, I'd be able to. There'd be enough fiber, right? There'd be enough muscle. There would be enough grit, strength, spiritual sort of nourishment that I could draw from, that a woman just wouldn't have the strength to be able to do. And then you realize like, oh, wait a minute, there are differences amongst the sexes for a reason. Like we're meant to survive. We're a species that has to struggle with life. I think that's where we draw a lot of our peace and serenity from, is knowing that there is going to be epics of violence, of turmoil, of destruction, of just sheer struggle. And that will give you that sort of balance that you need. And so we have to look for these in the modern era, right? How do we interpret nature and how do we use that in our current reality, right? Which is what you need to essentially create something from nothing. You need to be able to kind of dig and forge an identity and crystallize something out of creating beauty. And that could look many different ways. It could be pottery. It could be art. It could be sculpting your body. I mean, it's just whatever it is, but you need to find an endeavor to put that energy into, because if you think these modern institutions are going to do it for you, you're going to be doomed. You're going to be in trouble. So you need to really hyper focus on sort of like this pirate sort of escapade, if you will, right? You need to be solely dedicated to something that's entirely your own. Otherwise, you will atrophy and you will have a hard time adapting to this world. And because, like I said, if you're going to resist it, like I'm advocating for, then it's going to be a lonely road. There's going to be a lot of people that are not going to be supportive of your endeavors. And you need to be okay with that. And that's where you start to second guess and doubt yourself. And look, I'll give you an example. Like, I remember like just leaving the country and going to like Latin America, and just immediately I felt like a sense of relief because the culture was automatically not as feminized. It was very much still traditional in many ways. And I immediately felt an uptick, right? I felt a sort of liberation, if you will, of feeling, emotion, acting. I didn't feel like I had to tiptoe around anything like I do here sometimes, which I don't want to do anymore. And I don't, for the most part, do anymore. But there isn't that feeling of trepidation in the air. There is a lot more wildness, right? It's a lot more free. There's a lot less government control, good or bad, right? However you want to see that. But traveling to other countries really gives me an eye opener, and I think to myself like, oh man, this is just really something that we've allowed to happen. It's part of the culture that we've allowed to enter and become mainstream, and everyone just accepted it. And we can blame the boomers because they're cucks, Q like the Piers Morgan types. We could blame those guys, but the reality is like the younger generation has to decide and say, you know what, enough is enough. I'm not putting up with this. So it's really up to you. The other thing is a couple of things are also happening here. The other big elephant in the room is that fatherless homes have also kind of added another element to feminism, right? They've allowed it to sort of become more weaponized. The welfare state, right? The government becoming the father has allowed people to kind of make this even more of a reality, because if you don't no longer need a father to raise children, and you can depend on the state apparatus to sort of keep you afloat, then what ends up happening is you have really no desire to have masculine men. Like, what for if you have the government to help you? So if that wasn't even available, then that would be another reason to say, wait a minute, we need men. We need strong men to kind of pick up the slack. And the other thing is that as the government becomes the father, it allows for a lot of this reckless activity, this sort of ratchetness, this sort of baby mothership to become sort of a professional pursuit in many ways. And you see it, right? You see, a baby mom with 4 different kids with 4 different fathers. Like, what the hell? Like, how is this not put to shame? How is this even allowed? And the second order effect of fatherless homes is that dudes just don't know how to act. They've been reared by their mothers. They've been taught to behave a certain way, to react to a certain set of notions. I, for myself, was raised primarily with my mother for the longest time. And so what ends up happening is you get a lot of the reactions to the world from a feminine perspective. And so that will sort of have an effect for sure. And it did for me for a long time. So you need that strong male figure. And if you don't have that, then, you end up kind of going astray. You feel lost. You feel confused. You don't know how to be, what to do. So what I would advocate for you is to look at how men of older times used to behave, and you just see that there isn't this sort of looming monkey on their back, right? Which is feminism. And so go back to those guys, right? And see the carefree, careless nature that they had and they espoused. And you can kind of see like, okay, this is what I need to do. It's not about necessarily portraying something that you're not. It's really just trying to dig into your soul and find out what really makes you tick. When you find that, right, when you sort of lockstep with nature, I think there's a certain beauty and balance that comes with that. And never mind what the feminist take is going to be on that. You'll see that there's undoubtedly much more positive attributes that come from taking that attitude, that stance, than from quivering and sort of capitulating to the demands of essentially like the gynocracy. Anyhow, I hope this helps, and I'll see you in the next one.